community. I would like to introduce our first award recipient, Jeff Kahlden. Please come forward. Jeff Kahlden is the quintessential Texan. He's larger than life, he's tough, he likes to have a great time, and he doesn't say words like quintessential. So John Steinbeck, the seminal American author of Mice and Men, took a road trip around the country and wrote a book. This book was Travels with Charlie. Charlie was his poodle, Jeff. In this book, he wrote that Texas is a mystique closely approximating religion. And there are people who either love it with a passion or hate it with a passion. The same could be said about Jeff's football team, the Dallas Cowboys. We know that football is like a religion to Jeff. He's been known to volunteer COE board chairs to run the chains at a Texas high school football game. His love of football probably comes from him being a player. He was a tackle. And if you know the position of tackle, you know that you got two options with that position. You're either going to follow him down the field to the goal, or get out in front of him and let him take care of business, right? But more than anything, he protects you. He protects his programs, he protects his students. And football actually is a sport that explains a lot about Jeff. He's strategic, he doesn't talk often, but when he does, it's meaningful, it's impactful. And I know, we all know, it's time to pay attention. Steinbeck summed up his admiration for Texas in a verse. For all of its enormous range of space, climate, and physical appearance, and for all the internal squabbles, contentions, and strivings, Texas has a tight cohesiveness. Rich, poor, panhandle, Gulf, city, country. Texas is the obsession, the proper study, and the passionate possession of all Texans. This, I think, describes the TRIO movement. And no one has brought this Texas attitude and all of its greatness to this community and this movement more than Jeff Kahlden. Jeff, the example you provide all of us, your strength, your no-nonsense attitude, and the compassion that defines you, please accept this Walter O. Mason Award. Ooh. Let me get that for you. You're up.
While Joe goes back and fixes his speech, and everything he said is a lot of truth in that. And yeah, Christian Wiles had the pleasure of running chains with me one time. So, but thank you for bestowing this honor upon me on this day. I've been writing this speech in my head for the last 3 or 4 weeks as I drive to work. I have about an hour to drive a lot of days, so we'll see how it sounds after I put it on paper. But it's hard to believe I've been around in TRIO for long enough to receive an award like this, but I can honestly say it's been a fun journey up to this point. And for me, my time in TRIO can be summed up in about 4 points: accidents, people, students, and stuff I just can't make up. I'd also like to thank whoever wrote or touched up the bio and called me a powerhouse, because that's one I've never been called before. So as the great artist and philosopher Bob Ross once stated, "There are no mistakes, only happy accidents." I can definitely say I found my career in TRIO by accident. I was sitting in an educational psych class at Tarleton State University, and Jenny Watts, who is now the executive director of TRIO there, she was in the class taking the class to work on her certification in history, and she said, "Hey," he invited me to their office, and so that's where I met Brenda Faulkner and Jay McLean. And they kind of started their pursuit of getting me to become be a summer Upward Bound employee. And of course, how do they always included this pursuit? Well, they would take me to eat Tex-Mex food. So I'm a sucker for chips and salsa. So eventually I started working as a summer employee, and I was, my job description was called activities coordinator. What that meant is that I consistently drove a van and coached their volleyball team. We got third, by the way. Eventually, though, I also served as an RA and instructor, and then I also coached softball, which we won a lot more than just once. So, but I also still drove a van. So, in fact, short story, I drove a van, like that was my last car in college, because every other ones had conked out. So the students, this is during Austin Powers, they called it a shaggin' wagon. So, but you can fit 15 kids in there without a problem. But eventually I graduated, and they had a full-time position come open, and so I was happy to take it, and I was able to start my trio journey at Tarleton State University. Other happy accidents came along the way as far as meeting people. One of the people I worked with was my now wife, who was also on staff there as well. So, and that brings me to the people you get to meet in trio. When you're working in trio, you have opportunities to serve on different things. You have opportunities to meet people at conferences. And if you're a first-time trio person here, you got to make some new friends. Get outside of your box. But as I took part in serving on the Texas Trio, SWASAP, and COE boards, I was able to have the opportunity to make a lot of lifelong friends. To me, serving on these boards forced me to make new connections with people that I never would have gotten to know. Some of these trio professionals are people I can connect with whenever I can and see. My friend Al Bacon, who I met at the very first conference I ever went to in the big town of Abilene. Speaking of Abilene, my friends from Abilene Christian, Randy Scott, who I shared the back seat of a Prius with one time. Y'all ever met Randy? Randy's almost 7 foot tall. And of course, Gayla Harrington and my friend Karen Wilkerson, who's no longer with us after battling cancer. But also my Aspire friends, where I feel like I'm an honorary Aspire person. The Honorable Derek Sporbert, Amy Verlanik, Teresa Rader, and the others. And of course, all my SWASAP and Trio, Texas Trio friends. I'd be here all day if we talked about all y'all. So, but I do want to say thank you for working with you. But if you weren't it forced me to intentionally hang out with some people that I probably would have never hung out with had we not been put on a board together or elected together or chance to serve. So to me, working with people and making new friends is something that you have to do. But when you're in trio, you're not here for meeting people. You're here for helping students. And that's really one of the biggest things that I can honestly say it was something that was about me. I primarily worked in pre-collegiate programs for a lot of my life. And with that, you work with a lot of high school students. And in Tarleton and Weatherford and UA Fort Smith, a lot of those places had small rural towns. Now, I grew up in Weimar, Texas, and I thought I was from a small town where we graduated with 55. We worked with schools named Gustine and Lingleville and Huckabee. Chad Lester was one of my students from Gustine. He introduced himself one time. He goes, "My name's Chad Lester. I'm the president of the class. I'm the valedictorian. I'm the homecoming king. And I am the top 10% of my class," because he was number 1 out of 10. So yeah, but these Upward Bound programs, you get these rural kids, and we got them into Upward Bound, and they spent the summer with us, and they were able to have the confidence to go off to schools like Texas A&M or UT or Tarleton State, where there were a lot more kids there, and they were no longer considered the smartest kids in the room, so they had to learn how to adjust, and I think that's something that we do a lot of good work with. But with Trio, the challenges, I can say, a lot of times with our students, they're the underdogs. They have something against something, whether you're low income, first gen, disabled, they always consider to be an underdog, and I mean, who doesn't like rooting for an underdog? And I feel like I was one of those underdogs too, being a first-gen kid from parents who, my dad was a truck driver, my mom worked in factories. Eventually she became the lunch lady, and now they all are singing Lunch Lady Land from Adam Sandler. But while my geography changed from Tarleton to Fort Smith, Arkansas, to Weatherford, and now Dallas College, and shout out to my Dallas College peeps in the audience, they wanted more for their future. And students like Stephanie De Los Santos, who was the first of 4 who graduated, and she now has her own public relations firm. Students like Lacey Rumner, who's an SSS director at UA Fort Smith. Josh Jones, who's one of my adopted kids. He's a tennis coach, he's a math teacher. He's also a student that came to live with us in between his junior and senior year because his grandmother who was raising him had a stroke and was unable to take care of him anymore. So those are the things you do for these kids. You take them in, you make it possible for them. Also, I'd be remiss if I don't remember the students like Patty and Perla and Andres Hernandez and the Hernandez family who also knew their way to my heart with tamales every Christmas. And students like Lupe and Bernice and Gabby and Gerardo, and there's 2 more coming as far as with Upward Bound. So, we make impacts not on just 1 or 2, but families, much like the Whips had their impact here. So, plus all the other students, that we help make those dreams from these small towns, like they eventually get to go to Ivy League schools, like Angie Caceres, who's from Millsap. She graduated from Stanford this year. Brandon Wallace, who graduated from GW right here, he was from Mineral Wells. And of course, all the awesome graduates who went to the Tarleton State University. So, and finally, I promise the stuff that I just can't make up, and I've got numerous stories, but I'm going to keep it to one. So I had a student at Tarleton, his name was Starbuck Long. Not lying, his name is Starbuck, but it gets better. While none of his siblings ever got into Upward Bound for one reason or another, his siblings' names, and I can't make this up, he has brothers Buck Rogers, Apollo, Superman, and his sisters Veronica and Wonder Woman. Yeah, so needless to say, their parents loved comic books, and they weren't afraid to name their kids those. So, and finally, I want to thank my wife Dawn. I want to thank my kids Hudson, Quinn, Josh, and Nicole for allowing me to take them to random college campuses, because I like to do that on vacations, for them to sacrifice their time, for them to allow people like Christian to come run the chains at a football game, and all those things. But, and y'all who work in Trio, y'all just keep working for these underdogs, because they're always fun to root for. So thank you for this honor, and I appreciate it, and thank you very much.